I believe we're live now, and I see a bunch of people trickling in already, which is really cool. Um, yes, exactly. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few short seconds here as we let people get settled in. Let's drop in the chat. Where are you dialing in from today? Ali, do you want to kick us off? Where are you? Whereabouts are you?
I am currently in the beautiful town of Port Jefferson, Long Island, in Suffolk County, New York.
Amazing. And Meredith, I think you're muted.
Although it's not my home, I am right now in Venice, California, enjoying a little vitamin D and sunshine.
Awesome. And I'm dialing in from Vancouver, British Columbia.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm also in Vancouver and it's very cold. I don't think there's been as much sunny D here today as you're having it, Meredith. And I see folks coming in from all over as well. There's Arizona, New Jersey, Texas, Ohio, Florida, lots of really sunny places.
We got the Philippines.
Nashville, Orange County.
I'm feeling some kind of way with all these warm climate folks. Welcome. Thanks for bringing in a little bit of it with you. It's cold in Atlanta.
Cold in Atlanta. All right. Well.
Waterloo, cold and rainy. Yep. Awesome. Well, I think we can officially get started here. I know we have a lot of questions for our fireside chat today, and I'm really excited to just dive into it. So I'd love to just officially welcome everyone here today. Thank you so much for your time. We're really excited just to kind of dive into this topic of cultivating a culture of openness. And before we get into this super exciting topic, I would just like to kick it off with some really quick intros. So to start, this session is brought to you by ThinkHuman, which is a fantastic manager training and leadership development organization, and in partnership with Bucketlist, we're the #1 employee rewards and recognition platform. And with us today, we also have our friend Ali from Doctors Without Borders, which is an organization that provides medical care where people need it most. And just a couple of really quick housekeeping items. I'm sure many of you have discovered the chat box already. I just want to note that if it's a comment you want everybody to be able to see, please make sure that the blue button is selected to everyone so that it's not just us panels seeing whatever it is that you're saying. And if you do have a question that you want us to answer during the Q&A portion, please feel free to drop that into the Q&A box so it doesn't get lost with all the other stuff going on in the chat box. We also will be running a few polls, and when we share the results, it will be anonymous and aggregated. And lastly, we will be giving out the professional development credits at the end of the session, and we'll also be recording the entire thing. So if you have to hop early, no worries. We'll be sending all of that out over email after the fact as well. And so now I'll stop sharing my screen so we can see everyone's faces are really, really big during this conversation. And now I'd just like to head on into the introductions and just pass around the panel. So I can start. Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca, the Content and Community Manager here at Bucketlist Rewards. I'm also an advisory board member at HR.com and just support them with their annual State of Rewards and Recognition research report. I've been in tech for the past 6 years and have worked in a range of really seemingly random industries, including mental health, HVAC, and SaaS, but it's been really fun. Every industry needs that community building. I've been finding that people just love to gather and share over, their shared interest and common grounds, and it's just been really exciting and rewarding seeing folks making such a difference in each other's lives. And outside of work, I really like hiking, reading, and just enjoying the food scene in Vancouver. Meredith, I think I'll pass it off to you next, and you can pick whoever you want to go after you.
Great. I'm Meredith Haberfeld, founder and CEO of ThinkHuman. We're a manager training and leadership development company, as you said, Rebecca. And what are things that are useful to know about me? I am a mom, and my 2 little kids and being outdoors are like the the juice in my life, plus my work. I really am lucky to get to feel total flow getting to do the work that I do. So that's a little about me, and I pass it off to Allie.
Well, hello, everybody. I think I always start with, I think my life guidepost. Life is one big road with lots of signs. Bob Marley says, and when you're riding through the ruts, don't complicate your mind. And that's kind of my life way of thinking. And it really connects with being passionate and intentional and specific about the lives of people. And I choose to do that in this space, in really being hands-in, leaning into the work of people. How do you create an ecosystem of belonging? How do you make the time that people spend in with their work and with their colleagues meaningful and worthwhile? How do you reward them accordingly? How do you respect their diversity? And so including all of these different pieces, whether it's diversity, whether it's inclusivity, whether it's inclusion into the work of people, becomes the skeleton and the framework from which I operate. And what I love to shop. I'm one of those girls. If you could see my Amazon stuff right over to my corner, you'd be like, girl, you got problems. Seek therapy. My grandbabies, I have 2 girls. They're awesome. My family, my husband of nearly 40 years. It's good stuff. Life is good. Work is hard, but everything else is good. I know. Thank you, Rebecca. They do, and they see me coming. They're like, Allie, click, click, click. That's it. I'll turn it over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Allie. I love it. My name is Jason Lindstrom. I am the CEO over at Bucketlist Rewards. We are a rewards and recognition program. And on a personal side, I'm a dad. I've got 2 little girls, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. They are awesome. They're super fun. And then personally, nothing makes me happier than having adventures with friends, whether new or old. And if anybody's ever in Vancouver and you're looking for ideas on cool experiences, please feel free to hit me up. I love sharing cool adventures, things that people can do together. And I'll put it back over to Becca.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself. Loved learning more about all of you. And now, Tila, I'd love to get your help to launch our first poll. Now that you've all heard a little bit more about us, we'd like to hear a bit from you. So our first question is, what are the themes that you're most interested in today? We love asking this question just so it helps the panel see what it is we should focus more on today. We want to really make sure that the things that we're going over, the things that we're sharing are just super helpful to all of you. So I'll just let it sit for another 2 seconds here. I see all the answers coming in, and I know the rest of the panel, y'all probably can't see the responses, but so far, helping people feel comfortable with having difficult conversations is number 1. So I'll just stop sharing and I will share the results so that everyone can see it. At first glance, panelists, is there any sort of thoughts that you have around these results?
I'll maybe give a quick hot take on the results. I'm not at all surprised that having difficult conversations is the most popular one. I was at a CEO conference about a year ago, and they had all these different sessions taking place. The most popular session was it was called The Art of the Difficult Conversation. And that session was packed to overflowing, which just goes to show you, it's not like new employees or middle managers, it's all levels of leadership that are struggling to figure out on how to have difficult conversations. So my 2 cents, no surprises there. But what, Meredith and Ellie, what do you guys think?
I would say, no, it's not surprising because, if you just think of the psychology of people want to be liked. They want to be thought well of. And so having difficult conversation in most of our minds is that we're going to be saying something or sharing something negative or something that's not going to be well received. And so there is a culture of uncertainty that makes it really difficult. Are they going to react the same? How are they going to react? I know they're going to, you know, and all of those things that happen. So it's not surprising. And if we think about it honestly and truthfully, we probably avoid or want to avoid difficult conversations in our own personal lives. So how much more so, right, when we're talking with people on the job and at work, or, you know, how we connect with people. So not surprising, but I think it's our psychology.
Yeah, I'll just add a 2 cents that at ThinkHuman, we call the stuff that gets avoided. We say it gets swept under the carpet, and then you're walking around on lumpy carpets. And the thing with lumpy carpets is, like, yes, it's messy to sweep this stuff out. It does get messy, that's true. But lumpy carpets are awful. You're like, why am I tripping? Like, I keep tripping on this thing, and I don't know why I keep tripping, because I thought I was just walking on the carpet. And so when you lift up the carpet and sweep it out, all the dust comes, it's dirty, it's messy, and challenging, scary. And I don't think that, you know, we also say there's like the basic human skills you never get taught in school. You know, growing up, it's like, only say the nice thing and don't talk about the difficult thing at the Thanksgiving table. So we get reinforced with avoid the difficult conversations and then end up walking on these lumpy carpets. So work turns out to be the place where we have to learn the skill and then have the opportunity to practice the skill. And we all know, like, the juice that's on the other side of handling those lumpy carpets. It's like, it's profound, but it doesn't change that it's scary every time.
I love that analogy of like the lumpy carpet, and it's kind of tying with what Crystal, Tiffany, and Kate are all saying in the chat too, where it just seems like something that people avoid, and it just can be hard to do it, especially when the other person like doesn't seem like they want to be having those difficult conversations. So I think that's all a really good segue into the first question that we want to talk about today. So let's dive on in. So the first question is, how can organizations cultivate an environment that encourages open conversation, open communication? And in your experiences, panelists, what strategies or mindsets foster open and honest dialogue? And yes, I'll let it marinate for a second, and then I'll toss it over to Jason, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, I'm okay, cool. Thanks, Becca. I think there's two things that really help build open communication. I think the first is to establish trust. And I think this ideally comes from the leadership down. A lot of people won't share their honest opinions until they feel like they're in a safe environment. You never want your team to be asking themselves, will I be punished for sharing this opinion? And I think as a leader, you need to make it really safe for people to make mistakes, to be wrong, and to be themselves. And I would add one detailed point on it. As a leader, it's always easy to say, so like, make it safe to make mistakes. But when people mess up, it has to be okay. Like, you can't just say that and then you kick their ass because they screwed something up. And if anybody's interested in this topic, because I know people often love resources when they attend sessions like this, there's a really great book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I have no affiliation with this book, so I just love it. It provides a really great framework on how to build trust and how to develop open communication. It even includes an assessment to see whether your team has high trust. And I just encourage you to check it out if you're interested. And then one other maybe mini point. One way to make people feel safe is to let them know that they're valued. In my experience, it's important to constantly look for ways to lift people up. I think you want to make deposits into people's emotional piggy banks. You want to fill their bucket. Yeah, I see you, Meredith, snapping there. It's really cute. My daughter came home from her grade 1 class and she's talking about how she got in trouble because she was emptying somebody's bucket at school, which is, you know, the negative feedback. But it's cute. Like, sometimes you learn these skills that you can later leverage in life. And then, because I'm always interested in psychology, one final fun fact. For most people, it takes about 3 positive interactions to outweigh 1 negative interaction. And some studies say it takes between 5 positive to outweigh 1 negative interaction. And that's based upon a book called How the Brain Learns. But anyways, I would love to hear Meredith's and Ali's thoughts on this.
Ali, you jump in first.
Well, I think this is something that, as Meredith mentioned, where it's reinforced as humans in our normal interactions of life. And we're never taught that there's no leadership class. Like when you get promoted, it's just not the first thing that workshop or learnings that you get. So for me, organizationally, there's a couple of things that I think an organization has to do. That the organization have to have kind of a leadership strategic plan, like as they begin to identify their leaders, that there are this kind of a university thinking place. What are some of the core things that we would want our leaders to begin to develop as a muscle? One of them is, of course, coaching and training and the ability to develop, but a lot of it is in the ability to coach, train, and develop. You often have to have difficult conversations. So I think part of that is an organization. Again, remember I talked about intentionality, being intentional about how they define and grow their leadership. What are some of the key things that you need to have? But I believe that an organization have to begin to create this environment from the very life cycle of the person. So how do you interact with your organization, to an organization? When you look at a job posting, what has been your interaction with the recruitment team? What is your orientation and your onboarding focusing on? Really having this human-centered way of strategically thinking about people, not just when they get there, but even before even as they're thinking about coming to you. So I think organizationally, there's some things that planning of what leadership is, having clear, concrete, and concise ways of working and thinking about leadership. But as importantly, introducing people to your organization in a way that carries through from candidacy to hire to on and on. So their entire life cycle. For me, having difficult conversations personally, to me, is a mindset. I enter into a difficult conversation as an opportunity to reset with someone, to reset about something, whether it's the interaction on behavior, whether it's the competency of the work, but it's not an opportunity to all bang, 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 or ding, 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 but it's an opportunity for us to reset, to realign about how or what we're addressing, right? So if you go through it that way, you don't necessarily see it as the boogeyman-ish kind of a person-ish thing. And then additionally, if you do it right, difficult conversation are not a surprise. So hopefully you've been talking to the person, whether it's formally or informally. So if you are progressing the difficult conversation step by step, then when you come to whatever the end goal is, it's not as difficult as you think. And along the way, you build that trust, but more importantly, you build the confidence in the person and building that muscle in yourself that this is part of the work of leadership. This is part of helping your people to grow. So to me, it's a mindset. It's a reframing and a rethinking that I think is helpful.
Sorry, Ali.
Yeah, no, I'm done. Yeah.
And on the end of what you were saying, I ThinkHuman, I promised to everybody here, we did not plan this, but Ali and I, but at ThinkHuman, the foundation of our challenging conversations work is about mindset, and that you can teach a lot of frameworks. People need frameworks. It's important for people to have that to anchor into as like a, helpful guardrails for a conversation. But the mindset is like the compass that changes everything. I love Reset at ThinkHuman. We say that challenging conversations are about alignment and partnership. And when it's about alignment, which is similar to Reset, really, it's like, let me understand your world and let me have the courage to share my world. And by the way, courage is required on both: courage to share my world and courage to take in your world. A lot of the time in challenging conversations, we focus on like, get the hard thing out rather than take the hard thing in. And so it takes courage on both sides. I think that in my view, when you're working on culture change for a culture of openness, it's been said a couple times in this conversation, but the place to start has to be the leadership. You can do all you want working with the frontline managers and all staff, but if you don't have the senior leadership modeling these behaviors, nothing you're going to do is going to be super sticky. So starting there, and I think the key behaviors to work on are how they receive feedback. Do they make it safe and actionable? How they handle breakdowns. Like, do they bring curiosity and supporting others to grow, whether it's people or process, rather than blame, accusation, sharp elbows, defense. And really, I think underneath both those things is, are they modeling curiosity? Are they bringing curiosity to the feedback they're getting? And are they bringing curiosity to when there's a breakdown? Yeah, you got to resolve the breakdown, but curiosity to what happened and how do we support that person and process to grow.
Amazing.
If I can just add one more, I think that oftentimes managers and leaders have a difficult time with difficult conversations because we often take it personally, right? We're like, I'm a good person. How could, I've tried, I've done this, I've done that. And because sometimes, information is not always received in the way, there's intent and there's impact. You may intend it somewhere, but the impact of it comes back at you really hard. Somebody's like, oh, she's so this, or he's so that, or they're this or that. And sometimes we ingest that. And again, that begins that cycle of dysfunction.
Yes.
And it's very hard to now build trust and confidence because now we begin to ingest critique or criticism in a way that is often just reasonable when you often have to share difficult news with people. So I think part of that is we have to be okay with hearing difficult things, receiving it, and not kind of echoing it back in defense and, as Meredith mentioned, elbows and all that stuff.
And we don't typically train people in receiving feedback. You certainly don't learn that. It's not like usually feedback conversations, even challenging conversations, often focused on get the hard thing out. And rarely, I mean, I ThinkHuman, we have a program on receive feedback. I don't mean to be plugging it, but it's like, it's rare that people are raising their hand saying, hey, I really need to learn to do this. It's not a medicine, it's a vitamin. So nobody's like saying, oh my God, I'm not good at that. Let me go learn to do that better. But it's the kind of vitamin that can be really transformational at the foundation of how a leadership team or organization operates.
Amazing. Well, I heard lots of different pieces in there about tips on building an open culture. And y'all talked about top-down senior leadership, having curiosity and building that human-centric progress, having it incorporated into every kind of step of that employee life cycle. So that is awesome to hear. And so I want to ask a follow-up question to this, because I know there's a lot of people having different types of distributed work models. Do you feel that building a culture of openness kind of differs depending on what sort of model you have, whether you're, hybrid, remote, completely in person? I'll just open up for the panelists to kind of take it.
I would say I'd really be curious to hear Meredith's and Ellie's thoughts on this as well. I'll speak to my experience. We're a remote team, and I've historically run in-person teams in my past, but I found with a hybrid distributed remote teams, you have to be way more deliberate about creating human connection and communication. And so we have tons of scheduled and regularly rhythms and processes in place to bring people together to provide more and better communication. So I'll go like big to some of the small things, but we do a weekly all hands meeting called the huddle. Everybody's supposed to show up and be on camera. And it's where we kind of share like the good news inside the organization, how we're performing, but we're constantly pushing information out to create transparency and openness. And then we do annual meetings and annual planning sessions and quarterly planning sessions. There's weekly one-to-ones between all team leads and individual contributors. And again, those are always meant to be done on video. So we have all these rhythms and processes in place. And then of course that's supplemented by like instant messaging tools like Slack and email. But it would be, in my experience, humans like we're community driven creatures, and we like I could never imagine myself being a dad where my kids were in another province or country. Like that'd be an extremely challenging situation. I'm sure you could do it. It's way easier the more you bring people together and provide structure and systems and processes to connect one another. But that's kind of my take on how we're tackling that issue at Bucketlist.
I think those mechanisms you mentioned, Jason, are super critical. It's one thing to have an intention, but if you don't have mechanisms that or processes that support that at scale, kind of all is lost. I think one thing that you mentioned that I just will highlight is having managers have attention on really having their people be known, not just the frequency that they're having one-on-ones, but that managers really know information about their direct reports, whether it's, how many kids they have, what their life is like, how their workflow is going, what's going on in their world, and not in an intrusive way, but in a way that creates human connection. If everything is, you can get on a one-on-one every week and have it be a totally transactional experience. So having there be human touch point, and to me, managers are the gift that keep giving, like they are touching everyone. So having managers have their attention on, do I know each of my people with some depth and resonance?
That's such an awesome point, Meredith. And maybe some tactical things I can share that we do that relate specifically to getting to know your people better. In those weekly one-to-ones, we have this list of like 8 questions. And some of the questions include, and they're optional, you don't have to ask these every week, but the manager can ask their team member, what's the best thing that happened to you inside or outside of work this past week? How are you doing out of 10? What's like one great contribution from one of your team members? Just trying to really round out the conversation so that there's some it allows people to talk about what's happening at work, but also what the important stuff that happens outside of work as well. Yes, my 2 cents.
We start, just in terms of other tactics, this is certainly not for everybody, but we start every weekly planning meeting with a quick round of some personal connection question. And, the whole thing takes maybe at the high end, if there's a lot of chatting, 5 minutes. So it's not like it's eating up so much time, but week after week, it just keeps peeling back layers of like, wow, I really didn't know that about that person. And then it's just not a one-to-one exchange, but a one-to-many, which creates some depth and connection across an entire team.
Mm-hmm. And I love what Cindy here is saying in the comments about leveling the playing field for employees and providing learning opportunities. Ali, that's like what you were bringing up earlier, and I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think this is a challenge, as how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep them connected? Not just from a team perspective, but organizationally, right? I've been all 3 of those type of employees. I've been an employee who had to go into work every day. I've been an employee who worked many years remotely, and I'm currently in a hybrid environment. And I think whatever the mechanism, whatever the structure that you use, the key is intentionality. It is, even being on camera, someone can be present but absent, right? So for me, it is, again, that big tent organizational value always being top of mind, of having an environment where people are heard, seen, valued, respected. And how does that translate for the people who are not every day in the office is the work of leadership. It's not easy because, yeah, sometimes, it's easier to, have your camera off than and then if you insist to someone and says, oh, well, let's all have our cameras on. And it's like, oh, I'm not feeling well today. I'm not camera ready. And, all of the other things. So for me, it's intentionality, but it's always keeping that big organizational mandate in mind and then trickling that down into behavior. What does seen mean? What does heard mean? What does value mean? And how do you now, template that to people that you don't see every day? How do you recognize their work when you talk about rewarding them fairly? Well, how does that happen if you're not seeing them every day? It's that intentionality of leadership that I think overcomes or allows you to be much more creative in ways that you wouldn't ordinarily have to. But it is a constant reevaluation when you work either 100% remotely or hybrid, or even in person. I've been in an organization where I went to work every day and sat next to somebody and never spoke to them. So, I mean, the whole thing can be connected in some way. That's it.
I love your point about intentionality, especially, in remote environments where you don't see people all the time, so you can't really read their body language if they're like shooting you a quick like Slack message. And so just being really intentional about the way you're communicating and being open is just so important. So thanks for sharing that, Ali. The next question, I actually want to dig a little bit deeper into the really tactical ways in which leaders can help people feel more comfortable about having those difficult conversations. I know prior to this, we talked about having the correct mindset, getting leaders to set the examples. And so I would love to hear from you panelists. What are some tactical things that have really worked well, or how you've seen work well having those difficult conversations in the past?
I'll jump in with a couple of things. I think that when somebody has a difficult conversation with a leader, the leader can have their eye on two pillars. Am I making it safe for this person? And am I making it actionable? And actionable doesn't mean you have to action every single thing they're saying. You use discernment, but having there be some evidence that if somebody has a difficult conversation with you, you do something with it. It's not just like people are shouting into the wind, because sometimes you have a leader who's like, yes, I hear you. And you do that a couple times and you're like, all right, nothing's changing. So why am I even having these difficult conversations? So I think you have to make it both safe. Leaders across the board have to make it both safe and actionable. And on the safe side, I actually think the bigger impediment, like the where one's attention can go, is not on the things to do. There are a lot of things to do, but I think leaders, if they're only trying to hold on to a couple of things, it's better to focus on the things not to do, because there's like a couple of things that immediately undermine safety. And it's like an example I always think about is like if you're cultivating a garden and you're giving it sunshine and light and nutrients, and you're trying so hard to make this beautiful, safe environment, but then once a week you go stomping through the garden, that once a week kind of undermines all the other efforts. So first and foremost, notice what are the things you do that stomp through the garden. And for some leaders, that's confusing. Like it's not necessarily obvious. I was just with a leader who cares so much about her team, and she's like, I don't know why people won't tell me the real things. And it took like some real, back to Ali's focus on intentionality, took some real commitment and intentionality on her part to be like, okay, what are the things that I am doing that are stomping through the garden? Part one is her recognizing power dynamics, because power dynamics are a thing. Like it's a lot easier to have a challenging conversation with somebody who has less power than you do. So for a leader to recognize that people, like any scary conversation is scary for everybody, but if you're fearful for your job, the implications to your life, that's some real stuff. So accounting for that. And then in terms of other stomp through the garden, having leaders look at what are the things I might be doing. Do I batter people with questions, like lawyering them when they're trying to give me feedback? Do I have quiet retaliation? So I might be like nice in the conversation, but then 2 weeks later, all of a sudden they're no longer getting good projects and they're, frozen out of a meeting. So it takes some objective observation of oneself. But leaders are capable of this. Like, what are the things that I do that undermine safety for my team? Don't feel bad about it. We all do it, not intentionally. We don't wake up in the morning like, gee, I can't wait to undermine trust in my team. And yet it happens all day long. So if we can get real about what are the things that I'm doing that stomp through the garden, and then self-regulating and tracking around those behaviors. So that's a couple for me. How about you, Allie?
Yeah, those are some good ones. It's taking some notes. I prioritize in my mind. I kind of think it through. Now we have there's difficult conversation. Hey, you've been coming into work or logging on, 5 minutes late every day. Tell me what's going on. And then there is, much more difficult conversation that may impact people's life in terms of real and concrete ways, right? So every difficult conversation is not a sky is falling, right? So I think sometimes we kind of clump it all together. So one of the things to me that I think that I do, which again is that it's ability to reset. That's the first premise, but it's really about going through, what do I know about this person? Is this something that we've talked about before? Is this something kind of new? So sometimes I don't even go into the difficult conversation about the thing that's difficult. I often start with, tell me what's going on. It's been a minute since we talked. What's happening? And then, because sometimes if you know of the person, this, whatever it is, may be kind of outside of what they would normally do. So I think, and also honestly, it's trial and error. People are imperfect. And so even with the best intention, the impact and your intent often are at cross purpose. So I think the more you get comfortable, the more you develop some of those skills, the more you develop the muscle, the things that, Meredith talk about, looking at it from this lens, really entering in, prioritizing the person and not the situation. I think all of those things kind of help you become more comfortable, having difficult conversations, because sometimes you have to deliver bad news, and that's the reality of it.
Mm-hmm. I will also, along with that, Ali, which I love the idea of prioritizing. We supposed to do that with our goals, everything. So it makes sense we should do it with this as well. But I really like Suzanne's question earlier on in the comments asking about how to receive constructive feedback. And I would just love to hear from the panelists, either if you have any resources or any tips or strategies on this. Jason, I can kick this one off to you first.
Maybe I'll answer that at the end and I'll start off with like the art of difficult conversations. So I think Meredith mentioned this earlier, the importance of training your people on how to do this. And I think that's really important to provide them with like tools, tips, and tactics on how to have those conversations. In my experience, there's a few like tactical things that I've found landed really well. Anytime somebody new joins a team, especially a leader, I often ask them, how do they like to be led? Do they like to just be given like open-ended questions or goals and they backfill it? Or do they like to like more of a detailed approach to leadership? And I also ask them, how do they like feedback? Do they like direct feedback, story-based? Is it coaching type of feedback? Like get people's participation from day one. And when giving feedback, I would say, don't wait. For me, I sometimes like to let things process for 24 hours, but if you wait too long, like often there's an incident attached to something that happened. And Meredith, you mentioned earlier about like, if you don't address your problems, they're like lumps under a rug. I have another good metaphor that I love. which is like, if you don't deal with your demons and you lock them away in the basement, they're just down there lifting weights, getting stronger. So like the longer you leave something unresolved, the worse it gets over time. And anytime you do these difficult conversations, I think it's okay to make people feel valued. I saw in one of the comments that somebody said they don't like the BS sandwich, and I totally agree. Like, don't give a positive, negative, positive. But I think it's okay if somebody's a fantastic employee and you feel like in the conversation they're being destabilized by the feedback that you're giving them. I always like to make them feel valued at the end of it. Like, hey, this is one thing, it's highly correctable, we'll address it. It's a point in time. In a week's time, we'll have this addressed or whatever it might be. But like, fundamentally, you're fantastic and we value you. And like, just making sure people have context on how deep or how important the feedback is. And then the last thing around feedback I like to do is ask permission. Like, if people know that you genuinely want to help them and help them on something like maybe like the question could be, look, I have some feedback for you. I can help you with recruitment, with selling more, or delivering a better presentation. Is it okay that I share that with you? I think that's a really nice way to start the conversation, because it comes from people understand you're trying to lift them up, correct often like a behavior, and it's not an issue related to them. So those are kind of my top tips on delivering or having difficult conversations. And we recently ran a difficult conversation workshop internally at Bucketlist, and it was really well attended and really well received. So it's fun watching our own people develop the skill set a little bit better. In terms of how.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I totally thought you were finished, but please continue.
No, I'll wrap it up there because I don't want to talk too much. And I don't know if I actually answered the question, how do you teach your people on how to receive good feedback? So maybe that's a question Meredith or Ali can jump in on.
I dropped a couple things into the chat, which there's 4 points I put in there. Say back what you hear. We're terrible at actually capturing what somebody said to us. It's like somebody says you're, X, whatever it is. And we're like, oh no, our defense mechanisms go up. We hear some version of what we think they said. So actually saying back, what I hear you saying is X. In my own experience, practicing receiving feedback, a lot of the time I didn't get it right, or I didn't get it completely. So giving the chance for people, A, to hear like, oh yeah, that is what I'm saying, or more often than not, yes, and not exactly. Also, this other thing. Okay, got it. So what you're saying is, and then say it back again. I know it sounds redundant and repetitive, but people, it's like how we get in alignment with each other. And until the bucket is empty, like people come in with a full bucket and letting them empty the whole bucket all the way out. Like, is that everything? Did I get it all? Because if you leave that back to the, sorry to mix metaphors here, we got lumpy carpets, emptying buckets. But if you empty out some of it, but not all of it, you still got stuff there that's, like becomes an issue. So saying back what you heard, making sure you got it correctly and fully, and if not, saying back until you did, then let them know what you're going to do about it, which could be nothing, could be I'm going to think about it, could be I'm really not sure what I'm going to do about it, but I'm going to get back to you at some future date. But some acknowledgement that they didn't just shout into the wind. And then lastly, thank people for being willing to have that kind of conversation with you, because no matter who's doing it, it's scary.
Receiving, the receipt of it. I think everything is recognizing that sometimes you're not going to get it right all the time. And I do like that feedback kind of conversations where, you say to people, so let me make sure that I'm hearing it, not just saying it. Let me make sure I'm hearing what it is you're saying correctly. So the person knows that you're just not hearing them because you have ears and it works, but that you're listening, because they're often stuff underneath. And so I think you have to practice what you preach, right? You've got to be able to receive difficult conversations or difficult feedback yourself without, elbows and getting really defensive. But I think people, you develop this sense of cadence of trust, right? And again, not every difficult conversation leads to something, life eventing. Sometimes we got to prioritize it. Sometimes you're just going to pull somebody's coattail that they've missed 2 meetings. It's not the same thing as they've missed a project date, right? And sometimes we kind of make that leap that every conversation have to be deep and intense. So sometimes it's like, all right. And then you hear that maybe they were late for a reason. So that's why I think the feedback is important to say, okay, so am I getting it right? Tell me what I've missed, and engage in it in a conversation, not in a dialogue. So that's the bigger tip. That difficult conversations, not dialogue. You telling people what's wrong, but not hearing anything else. Make it a true conversation, and prioritize the importance of it in the work life, in the way you work. Is this how you're delivering? Is this part of your organizational value around people? And some of the other things that both Jason and Meredith talked about. But for me, it's really making it a true conversation, being open to hearing it. That rephrase technique is always important. But before people walk away, are we clear? I mean, I don't want you to leave with misconceptions, and I don't want to walk away with misconceptions. Are we on the same page? Are we okay? I'm checking in. And then check in, like, 2 days later, a day later, whatever you say. Hey, Antonio's going to check in. So follow up, follow through, intentionality. I think all of that is good leadership development and technique and skills building.
Amazing. That's a great way, Ali, to wrap up this section of that. So thank you. I'm just taking a look at the time, and I want to leave some room at the end for Q&A. And so I think this is a great time just to go around the circle of panelists one last time and share what's one key takeaway that you want people to kind of walk away with from today. Because I know a lot of really great things were said. So if you could just pick one thing around building a culture of openness, what would it be? And Meredith, I'll kick it to you to start.
Working with the senior leadership team. And if it's really not, if there's like real issues in the senior leadership team, start with the CEO. You can't get further in the organization if the senior leadership team isn't modeling it. And if the senior leadership team really has a lot of issues, you're not going to get those resolved without the CEO creating different kinds of conditions. So working with them on that.
Amazing. Jason?
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with what Meredith said. I sit in the CEO seat, and I don't know if there's any CEOs out there in the audience or any senior any people leaders. But I think sometimes a team can be performing well, but then there's exceptionally performing teams. And I think at Bucketlist, we have a really great culture. But to Meredith's point, like we're doubling down on building trust and communication in the senior leadership team. And there's some really cool and fun exercises you can do to lay the groundwork on that. For example, in a few weeks' time, with the SLT, we're gonna do something called Lifelines, which is each person's gonna come to the meeting and they're gonna reflect back upon their life, and they're gonna talk about 3 to 5 moments in their life that are absolute highlights or like down moments. And I know I've done this exercise before with other people, and it's an amazing way to connect people and start to build that foundation of trust. And I'm not saying you have to do that exact exercise in your organization. There's lots of great ways to do this. Like if you just Google trust building exercises, you'll find lots of great stuff on it. But I would say, yeah, like I'd say shoot for the stars, build an amazing foundation of trust, and do it with tactical tools, or hire a fantastic partner, like maybe like Meredith's company, to lean in and help you guys out. But you can do this internally or externally, but go for it. Like try to build a high performing team. The vision I'm setting for our SLT in the company in general is I want people to be able to look around to like their left and right and feel like with the people in the room, we're going to be able to take on the world. And so with that as a foundation, that's the type of team I want to bring together. So Ali, what are your thoughts on this? What's your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I think I live by the philosophy that I teach my leaders. I have 7 directors and a team of 37, but we in people and culture support an organization of hundreds, right? So for me, it's about that journey to understanding. It's the 4 tenets. I teach it to my leaders. I talk about it all the time. You know, whenever you're creating an ecosystem of belonging and openness, you really have to have something very kind of linear in homes of your thinking. But there's that journey to understanding. There's and there is that shared accountability and responsibility to the greater good. It's not just on leaders. We have to also have people willing to buy into it and help people do that. And then there is that creating the systems and structures, some of the tactical things that we've been talking about, workshops and, you know, bringing in different teams with different voices and ways of working to help us get to this system and structure that is buffeting this whole culture of belonging. And then it's really kind of building scale and it becoming a muscle in how we operate. So to me, it's being intentional. It's also recognizing that people are imperfect and so are you, and always remembering what it's like when you have been or are or were on the other side of that difficult conversation. What would have wanted that person or person to say to you that could have helped you in that moment? So I think, again, that word just keeps popping up. If you think about what that felt for you, remember that you're working with people and not processes. And yeah, what an exceptional team may be good technically, but are they talking and working and sharing and giving each other grace? Or is there a culture of those kinds of things? So I think it's journey to understanding, shared accountability and responsibility, creating those structures and systems, and building scale and durability in the way we work, how we connect with each other every day. And I think it'll get better the more you do it.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Those are all really great and inspiring takeaways. And so now, Tila, if you wouldn't mind popping up our next poll as we kind of head into the wrap-up section of today's session. On a scale of 1 to 10, how valuable did you find the content that we shared today? Yeah, feel free to just select the number that you most resonate with. And if there's something specific that you want to tell us as well, you can feel free to drop that in the chat box. And I just wanted to thank everyone in advance for giving us this super valuable feedback, just because it really helps us figure out how to kind of improve our sessions in the future. Awesome. And as people are voting, I will share my screen again to give our panelists an opportunity to share a little bit more about the work that they do. And let me find my share button. There we go. Perfect. Meredith, would you like to go first?
Sure. You want to hear just a little spiel about who we are? We're a leadership development and manager training company that works with leaders of all levels. Our focus, leadership can mean many different things, and our focus is leadership of self and leadership of others. So the pieces of leadership like strategy, decision-making, execution, all super important, not what ThinkHuman does. ThinkHuman focuses on how do you bring out the best in yourself and others. And I started the company because I had the really incredible fortune to work for a mentor who showed me that when you take a good business model and combine it with people who are unleashed, something really quantum happens in the business. And that really turned on the lights for me. And so, as we chatted about in this conversation, we lead programs about, inclusion, emotional intelligence, challenging conversations to get leaders at every level into a personal growth mode about those things. So that's us. And can I pass it over to you, Jason?
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about creating a culture of openness, and I think a foundation of that is making people feel valued and recognized. The other bonus of recognition is when you take good care of your people and team, you can lower voluntary turnover more than 40%. And as you recognize people, they're going to feel more connected to your mission, vision, and values. And we can drive up engagement more than 25%. So if you're interested in learning more, we have a super cool platform. Makes it easy for staff to recognize one another. It makes it easy to reward people if you're interested in that. And we work with some fantastic organizations, everything from RBC Bank to Chick-fil-A to the NFL. But if you want to learn more, please feel free to request a demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I'll let Tila throw up that poll for us. And now I will share the professional development here up on the screen. And as we head into Q&A, I'll also just pop it into the chat. So I'll kick things off with our first Q&A question. Panelists, y'all ready?
Rebecca, can I just
Sorry,
put a plug in for Doctors Without Borders? As you may not know, that we are an organization that goes in places and spaces where others cannot and will not go, in crises that are often devastating to the human condition, whether they're man-made, oftentimes man-made, or natural. And so when you think about giving, think about Doctors Without Borders, doctorswithoutborders.org. We continue to be faithful and mission driven to the work of saving lives and being of value to the world in the work that we do. Give.
Ali, my wife works in healthcare, and one of our charities of choice is Doctors Without Borders. And like, holy smokes, if you check out their website and you want to read compelling, heart-rending messages about an organization making the world a better place, Doctors Without Borders is an amazing organization. Super cool.
Thank you all for sharing. I think we do have time for a couple of Q&A questions. And so the first one, what form of planning would lead to betterment of a program within the L&D, and how could someone best handle shortcomings as a form of growth? Does this question resonate with any of the panelists who would like to take it first?
I think I understand the question.
I'm trying to understand the question. I'm sorry, ma'am. Go ahead.
No. Ali, go ahead, please.
Just if you can just repeat the question again. I think something was lost in the translation.
Yeah, no worries. The question is, what form of planning would lead to the betterment of perhaps like an L&D program, and how can, and I guess those two separate questions. And the second part is, how could someone best handle shortcomings as a form of growth? So asking, about growth development.
I can jump in on this. I think that assessments like DISC, I'm not the hugest, DISC or assessment fan, but I actually do think assessments can be a really helpful way to have people take an objective look at like, oh, I have these amazing strengths and they're so beautiful and they move the organization forward in powerful ways. And those same strengths, when we're on overdrive or when we're in stress response, become undermining to my own effectiveness and the effectiveness of others. And when you look at it in the context of like every single style has strengths and has overuse behaviors when under stress that undermine effectiveness, kind of depersonalizes the conversation, and you can get people kind of excited first about like, what are the strengths and how do they move the organization forward? And then like the flip side, how do those same strengths, when they're on overdrive, undermine effectiveness and trust, and get people excited about like, oh yeah, I see how I do it in this way and see how I do it in that way. So kind of like filling the love bucket first so that it's safe, and then opening up like, okay, and how do those same things become impediments? Ali, did you have something you wanted to share?
I think organizationally, for us, we are working on creating like a university and building a network of contractors, organizations that are people focused, learning and development. And where you have tight budgets, you keep it, small and prioritize on the area for the organization and your leadership that you want to focus on. So whether that is difficult conversation, whether that areas of DEI, so building something kind of tangible, I think is important. But as importantly, it's bringing your leaders together. Like I like to have a retreat every year, or 6 months to a year, just bringing the leadership together to talk about the way forward, to talk about things that are on their hearts and on their minds, things that they want to grow in their own professional life. I think connecting people on real relational levels are always a win. Being, the transactional way of working really misses out on that human-centeredness approach. And then you get to hear what leaders are struggling with in a much more critical way than you do if you don't also focus on your leaders as an important group in your organizational tank as well.
I think you're muted there, Becca.
Of course, this always happens. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I just know we're at the hour now. Before we wrap it up officially, was there anything that either of you panelists wanted to add?
Just that it was an absolute delight to be here with Meredith and Ellie today, and it was cool. It was fun to share some of my thoughts, but I also learned a bunch from both of you. I was even taking a few notes on the side. And then to the attendees, there's some amazing comments and ideas in the chat window. So thanks for sharing as well.
Yeah, for me, it's always a gift that folks want to hear what I think, because I want to hear what others think. How can I grow? How can I get better at this people stuff if I don't hear what other people think? But it's also nice to share what I think and how I work and what I think is important. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for such a great group of people online. Some of as Jason said, some of the comments were is inspiring and learning, and people were engaged. I love to use, let's lean in and learn together where folks were leaning in. Yeah, I love the vibes too, Shelby. I'm giving you the click.
Yeah, me
So.
too. Love the vibe. I'm so grateful for this community of such brilliant people and change makers.
Awesome. Well, +1 to everything that y'all said. And a big, huge shout out to you attendees today as well. Thank you so much for your time, for all your insightful comments. We really appreciate your engagement with us. And with that, I think we can call it a wrap. Have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week, and we'll see you all at the next event. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.